The hardships of the previous 15 years of war and depression were replaced by rising living standards, increased opportunities, and a newly emerging American culture confident of its future and place in the world stage. Today I want to inform you on how America became a superpower, how the economy surged during and after World War II, how the military became the biggest and the best in the world, and how society began to change following the years after World War II. My credibility is as I am a student who's going to school to receive my bachelor's in middle and secondary social studies. Before World War II, did you know that the United States was in a Great Depression? How much did America's economy change in post-World War II world? The GDP of the United States has had more than doubled in the years following World War II. According to a website, The Balance, GDP in the U.S. in 1950 was $2.184 trillion. That compared to 1933 when GDP in the U.S. was only $0.778 trillion. Secondly, the standard of living. Many Americans now are much better off than ever before. And this didn't really start to happen until around World War II ended, when many Americans came home and many jobs were available for them to work that had decent wages, and the newly created suburbs for them to live in with cheap housing and efficiently made. In the United States, the gross national product, which is a measure of all goods and services produced in a country, jumped from about 1.27 trillion in 1940 to 2.27 trillion in 1950 to more than 3.08 trillion in 1960. According to a study conducted by Multitude.com, the gross domestic product in the United States jumped from about 92 billion in 1930 to 291 billion in 1950. The United States during World War II became an industrial powerhouse that was unrivaled by any other country, and that carried into the years after World War II. Next, we're going to look at the military. Today, the United States military is the greatest military force in the world. After defeating the Nazis and the Japanese in World War II, the American military had established itself as the world's most powerful military. The American military had most technologically advanced military in the world and after World War II. During the war, America developed the atom bomb, and after the war, America developed a jet engine, even though Germany already developed one, but it was for the Americans to develop for our country. According to the National World War II Museum, at the start of the World War II, the United States had about 334,473 total military combatants in 1939. By the end of the war in 1945, the United States had over 12,209,238 men and women in the military. Now that we looked at how the military grew and got stronger and advanced technologically, let's look at how society began to change in the United States. American culture began to change at the moment World War II ended. America was no longer a country far and separated from the rest of the world. America was now the greatest superpower in the world, according to the History Channel. In the years after World War II, American ideas were spread around the world to fight off the growing number of communist countries. The Truman Doctrine was American policy in 1947 of providing economic and military aid to Greece and Turkey and other European nations to stop the spread of communism. Now, the Marshall Plan was the Truman administration's plan to rebuild war-torn Europe in order to prevent the spread of communism and to facilitate global trade and free markets and encourage European peace. Race was and still is a major issue in the United States. But in the early 1960s, Martin Luther King Jr. and other black leaders such as Malcolm X and Rosa Parks began to speak up about racial injustice that many blacks were facing in the country, especially in the South. During the 1960s, under President Lyndon B. Johnson, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was signed into law, granting blacks the same equal rights as any other American. After World War II began, a very noticeable sharp rise in birth rate. This was, of course, the baby boomer generation, a generation that spread peace and love. Many baby boomers established events like Beatlemania in Woodstock, or organizing against the Vietnam War, or fighting and dying in that same war. The baby boomers were very peace-loving people. They were firmly against the Vietnam War. They didn't want to be in it. Many black people, many of the black pride people were against the Vietnam War because several African Americans were being sent over there to fight and die in the war. I would say that really it was at the right possible time. The baby boomer generation, with black people standing up for their rights at the same possible time, really gave them what they needed to finally get the same rights as any other American. And finally, these changes have helped change and shape the world that we live in today. I believe without World War II, this world would not be the same, and America would not be the same. And America would not have become a superpower without World War II. We looked at how the economy, the military, and society in America changed following World War II. One last final thought is the United States of America became the world's biggest superpower in the years following World War II. We have a lot to thank to that for the many of the modern amenities and rights and things that were created and ideas that were spread in post-World War II America. Thank you.